I should have the whole incident should have never taken place, and I'm glad that you know.
But as far as hating each other on the field, yeah.
Where's the bunt and gets it down nicely.
MLB legends have exposed the crimes of a wife beater named Chuck Knoblauch, and at 57 years old, his legacy is forever defined by violence, scandal, and disgrace. Once celebrated as a four-time World Series champion and Rookie of the Year, Knoblauch's story began with promise. He was a four-time All-Star, a Gold Glove winner, and a cornerstone of championship teams. But that bright beginning makes his fall even more devastating. Knoblauch's career with the Minnesota Twins was legendary. He won Rookie of the Year in 1991, the same season he helped lift the Twins from last place to World Series champions. His sacrifice bunt in the 10th inning of Game 7 moved the winning run into scoring position. For 7 seasons, he dominated. He was selected to 4 All-Star games. He won 2 Silver Slugger awards. He even claimed a Gold Glove in 1997. His statistics were staggering. From 1991 to 1997, he accumulated 38 wins above replacement, outpacing Hall of Famer Roberto Alomar, who had 31. During his absolute prime, from 1995 to 1997, Knoblauch's 22 WAR tied him with Ken Griffey Jr. for most in the American League. He batted .341 in 1996 and stole over 40 bases in 3 straight seasons. This was not just an all-star. This was an elite Hall of Fame caliber player. The Yankees traded a massive package of prospects for him in 1998, installing him as their leadoff hitter. He won 3 consecutive World Series championships with New York. In 1999, he scored 120 runs and hit 18 home runs. His bat was critical to their dynasty. Even as he celebrated championships, something was unraveling inside him. The collapse began with the yips. The yips are a mysterious syndrome where elite athletes suddenly lose the ability to perform basic skills. It's classified as a movement disorder, a neurological breakdown of fine motor skills. But under the pressure of professional sports, it becomes a psychological nightmare. Players tell themselves not to throw it in the dirt, and then they throw it right in the dirt. Knoblauch became the modern face of this affliction. Other players had suffered from it before, including pitcher Steve Blass and catcher Mackie Sasser, but Knoblauch's case was particularly noteworthy because it forced him to completely change positions. The irony is brutal. He arrived in New York in 1998 with the highest fielding percentage of any second baseman in MLB history who had played at least 1,000 games. He had just won the Gold Glove. Then it all fell apart. In 1998, his errors jumped to 13. In 1999, the yips fully consumed him. His throws to first base became wild and unpredictable. He committed a league-high 26 errors that season. In his first 3 years with the Yankees, he made 54 errors. To understand how catastrophic this was, consider that he had committed only 66 errors in his entire 7-year career with the Twins. He had gone from the most reliable defensive second baseman in baseball to the least reliable. June 15, 2000 was his breaking point. Against the Chicago White Sox, he made 3 throwing errors in just 6 innings. The last 2 led directly to Chicago runs. A month earlier, he had admitted to teammates he was at the breaking point. This game proved it. After his 3rd error, manager Joe Torre walked to the mound to change pitchers, while the rest of the Yankees infield gathered around. Knoblauch stood alone at second base, hands on hips, wallowing in his pain. When the inning ended, he returned to the dugout, spoke briefly to Torre, and then walked out. He left Yankee Stadium in the middle of the game. It was a public surrender. 2 days later came the incident that turned his struggle into a national punchline. On June 17, 2000, Knoblauch fielded a ground ball. His throw to first was inexplicable. A wild sailing missile that flew over the first baseman's head, bounced off the dugout roof, and shot into the stands. The ball struck a fan sitting behind the dugout. That fan was Kay Olbermann, mother of prominent sportscaster Keith Olbermann. Keith himself had to report the incident on air, wryly noting that Chuck Knoblauch's throwing problem was getting personal, as the ball had hit his mother. The event moved Knoblauch's yips from the sports pages into pop culture infamy. The Yankees could no longer risk his scatter arm at second base. He was relegated to left field and designated hitter for his final seasons. This effectively ended his elite status. He played one unremarkable season with Kansas City in 2002 and was out of baseball by 2003. A psychological affliction he could not overcome had destroyed his career. But the collapse created more than just statistical problems. It fractured the clubhouse. The most significant legend to publicly expose Knoblauch's struggles was Yankees owner George Steinbrenner. The boss was not known for patience. In 2000, Steinbrenner told the media he was not as diplomatic as Joe Torre. He issued a public warning that the Yankees would not go far if Knoblauch and another struggling player didn't get straightened out. Knoblauch, in a rare move for a player, openly fired back at Steinbrenner in the media. This public feud placed immense pressure on the entire organization. The yips turned the Yankees club clubhouse into a media circus. ESPN's Buster Olney described the scene as a total wild card. Reporters were forced to stake out Knoblauch's locker every day, uncertain if he would speak at all. Olney described it as heartbreaking to watch, as a former Gold Glover melted down day by day, but it also created a toxic environment. Reporters felt like someone watching an accident on the highway. This constant, intense external pressure inevitably inflamed internal clubhouse friction. There was tension with reliever Jeff Nelson, reportedly fueled by Knoblauch complaining about Nelson's pitching in a game. But this tension was balanced by public declarations of support from team captain Derek Jeter. As fans and media intensified their criticism, Jeter took a public stand. He stated they were not winning without Chuck, demanding fans support his teammate. This split dynamic defined the clubhouse. The team was forced to publicly support Knoblauch because his bat was essential to their dynasty, but the fragility of his mental state and the accidents on the field created undeniable strain. If you're enjoying this deep dive into one of baseball's most complicated legacies, drop a comment below. Do you think the yips were the beginning of his downfall or just a symptom of deeper problems? Let me know what you think. While the yips ended his career, it is his off-field conduct that defines his legacy today. The reference to crimes in the plural is not an exaggeration. An investigation into his post-career life reveals a clear, multi-year documented pattern of escalating violence and aggression. On September 29, 2009, Knoblauch was arrested and charged with felony domestic violence for assaulting his common-law wife, Stacy Stelmach. Stelmach reported to police that they had an argument, and when she tried to take his car keys because she believed he was intoxicated, he punched and choked her. On March 16, 2010, this incident moved from allegation to fact when Knoblauch pleaded guilty to a misdemeanor assault charge. This was a criminal conviction. He received deferred adjudication probation for 1 year and was fined $1,000. His only public comment was a brief apology. The 2010 conviction was not an isolated wake-up call. In March 2014, just 2 months after the Minnesota Twins announced his election to their Hall of Fame, Knoblauch had another run-in with the law. On March 12, 2014, he was charged with interference with public duties. The allegation was that he had pushed a police officer. This incident was still outstanding when he was arrested again in July. It demonstrated a pattern of aggression that was not limited to domestic partners and was clearly escalating. July 24, 2014 was the incident that destroyed his legacy permanently. Just 1 month before his scheduled induction into the Twins Hall of Fame, Knoblauch was arrested again. He was charged with the assault of his ex-wife, Sherry Knoblauch. Police were dispatched to a domestic disturbance call at 3:49 in the morning. When officers arrived, they noted that Knoblauch appeared to be intoxicated. The details of the police report were violent and specific. Sherry Knoblauch told police her ex-husband had become upset that she was sleeping in another bedroom with her child. He allegedly grabbed her and smashed her head against a wall. He was also accused of hitting her in the arm and chest and throwing a humidifier at her as she fled the room. This was not a case of conflicting accounts. Officers at the scene observed and reported visible injuries on Sherry Knoblauch, including a large bruise on her arm, a larger scratch on the left side of her face, and a knot on her forehead. These were the recent news reports that forced the Minnesota Twins organization to act. The most powerful exposure of Chuck Knoblauch's crimes did not come from a single legend or teammate. It came from the very institution that built his legend in the first place. In January 2014, Knoblauch's redemption arc seemed complete. He had been elected by a 62-member panel to be the 27th member of the Minnesota Twins Hall of Fame. The induction ceremony was scheduled for August 23, 2014 at Target Field. This was to be his first official return to the organization since his bitter trade. A crucial point must be understood. The Minnesota Twins organization knew about Knoblauch's 2010 guilty plea for assault when they elected him. Twins president Dave St. Peter confirmed this, stating that Knoblauch was prepared to handle questions about his past and address the media when he returned to Minnesota. The organization was willing to overlook one conviction as a past mistake. The July 2014 assault on Sherry Knoblauch, however, was unforgivable. The arrest, which occurred just weeks before his scheduled ceremony and brought to light the March 2014 arrest for pushing an officer, demonstrated a clear, undeniable pattern of violence. It made his position as an organizational legend untenable. The Twins' reaction was swift, public, and decisive. Within hours of the news, the team released an official statement canceling the Hall of Fame induction ceremony. This was the institutional exposure in its most powerful form. Dave St. Peter's follow-up comments to the media were even more damning. He articulated a new standard for his organization, stating that off-field elements are equally important relative to the franchise's brand and the reality that players and former players are role models. This was the organization that drafted him, won a World Series with him, and was prepared to forgive his bitter trade demand. For that institution to so publicly and permanently disavow him was the definitive verdict on his character. St. Peter confirmed the cancellation was final, stating there were no plans to reschedule the induction. The unprecedented nature of this decision cannot be overstated. Organizations rarely cancel Hall of Fame inductions. The fact that the Twins took this step speaks volumes about the severity of Knoblauch's actions and the pattern of behavior they revealed. It was not just one mistake. It was a repeated, documented history of violence against women that the organization could no longer ignore or excuse. The timing of the cancellation also matters. The organization had already printed programs, sold tickets, and prepared for for the ceremony. Fans had made travel arrangements. Former teammates were scheduled to attend. Canceling an event of this magnitude so close to the date required extraordinary circumstances. The Twins were willing to absorb the logistical and financial costs because the alternative was morally unacceptable. Honoring a man with a pattern of domestic violence would have sent a terrible message to fans, sponsors, and the community. Knoblauch's actions also made him a pariah among some peers. Former MLB player Milton Bradley, while discussing domestic violence, used Knoblauch as an example, stating bluntly that he's a horrible human being. This comment from a fellow player reflects the broader sentiment that Knoblauch's off-field actions had erased any remaining goodwill from his playing days. Compounding the yips and the pattern of violence is a third distinct crime that taints his on-field legacy, the use of performance-enhancing drugs. On December 13, 2007, Chuck Knoblauch was officially named in the Mitchell Report, a comprehensive investigation commissioned by MLB into the use of steroids and other performance-enhancing drugs in baseball. The allegation against Knoblauch came from trainer Brian McNamee, the same personal trainer who was the central witness against Yankees teammates Roger Clemens and Andy Petita. McNamee's testimony was provided to Senator George Mitchell under threat of federal prosecution. It was highly specific. He testified that he obtained illegal human growth hormone and injected Knoblauch at least 7 to 9 times. McNamee stated that these injections began during spring training of the 2001 season and continued through the early part of that year. Unlike Clemens and other players who vehemently denied the report's findings, Knoblauch's response was different. While he initially expressed bewilderment at his inclusion in the report, his official response was far more damaging. On February 1, 2008, Knoblauch voluntarily met with the House Oversight Committee holding hearings on the Mitchell Report. In that meeting, he provided a stunning admission. According to the committee's official summary, Knoblauch told them that McNamee was accurate when he told Senator Mitchell that McNamee had injected him with human growth hormone. Knoblauch's admission was a confirmation of his ethical collapse. He attempted to justify his HGH use, claiming he had never done steroids, but that HGH was different. Tried to frame it as a recovery tool, arguing that the Yankees' grueling night game schedule meant getting to the next town at 4 or 5 in the morning, causing players to get run down and sick. The HGH, he claimed, was just a little bit of a boost, like taking vitamins. This admission placed his 2001 season and his entire career in a new light. It is bitterly ironic that his HGH use in 2001 coincided with the absolute nadir of his yips and the end of his career. Knoblauch himself later offered a hollow, self-serving epitaph for this ethical failure, admitting he did HGH but that it didn't help him out, didn't make him any better, and that he had the worst years of his career. It was not performance-enhancing for him. At age 57, the legacy of Chuck Knoblauch is complete and settled. The 3 primary narratives of his public life are no longer separate. They are fully synthesized into a single, comprehensive story of a 3-act fall. Act 1 was the on-field legend from 1991 to 1997, a Hall of Fame caliber trajectory as a World Series champion and Rookie of the Year. Act 2 was the public collapse from 1998 to 2001, where the yips and the surreal incident involving Kay Olbermann made him a national spectacle and symbol of psychological failure. Act 3 was the criminal pariah from 2009 to present, marked by the ethical collapse of his HGH admission and most significantly the moral collapse of his documented pattern of criminal violence. The final verdict on this legacy, the ultimate exposure, came from police reports detailing his violence, from congressional testimony confirming his drug use, and most powerfully from the very institution that raised him. The Minnesota Twins' 2014 cancellation of his Hall of Fame induction was the final institutional verdict. Their explicit statement that off-field elements and the responsibilities of being a role model are equally important to on-field accomplishments was the gavel striking down on his entire career. As we close this chapter on Chuck Knoblauch's story, there's an important lesson in institutional accountability. The Twins' decision to cancel his Hall of Fame induction represents progress in how we hold athletes responsible for their actions beyond the field. It reflects a growing awareness that domestic violence is never acceptable, regardless of someone's athletic achievements. Organizations are finally prioritizing the safety and dignity of victims over the glorification of abusers. That standard matters. It sends a message that talent does not excuse cruelty and championships do not erase crimes. If you think organizations like the Twins should permanently erase players with violent histories from their honors, or if you believe in redemption and second chances, drop your thoughts in the comments below. This conversation matters.